Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Zenith Live. And today we will be talking about getting deeper endpoint visibility for rapid troubleshooting and compliance. As we are a public company, this is a mandatory slide that we have to show you. All right, endpoint analytics. So today we realize that in a regular organization setup, the IT teams have to rely on multiple monitoring tools to monitor different aspects of the entire delivery chain. So they would have an application to monitor the performance, an application to monitor the network, and then an application to monitor just the health of the device itself. And we have now realized that the user's computer or device also plays a major role in the end user's experience. So it's extremely helpful to know if devices in the organization are running on the latest OS, they have all the latest patches installed, what's the software version, look at their history, and etc. And apart from understanding what's installed on the machine, it is also important to understand what are the resources being utilized by these softwares and the processes that it spins up. And this basically gives a good cue to the IT teams to identify if a machine or a device requires to be upgraded or it needs to be replaced. So for this purpose, ZDX is introducing three major features, and we'll take a look at all this. So one of the first features that we are rolling out is the device inventory. So today we already collect all of this information as part of ZDX. So now we will be introducing a new UI where you can look at how the device has been distributed across all of your users by manufacturers, model, brand are they using, and what are the details. Similarly, we will also be introducing a new feature for looking at what softwares are installed across all of your employees in your organization. You can look at the software, you can look at their version, history, and also the deployment details. Next, it is important to understand what processes are spun up as part of these softwares and what is impacting the CPU or memory, all the resources on the device. So processes inventory will allow you to view device health metrics like CPU, memory, disk, or Wi-Fi at a process level, which will allow you to identify what process is impacting these resources the most and take action against it. We have also partnered up with Microsoft Endpoint Analytics, also known as Intune, to basically get important information with this integration. So Intune, as part of their Endpoint Analytics package, captures a lot of important information like boot score, startup score, software application reliability score, etc. So it'll be helpful to get all of this information into ZDX so that the users who do have this integration will be able to view all of the details in one single application along with the context of the ZDX. All right, let's dive a little deeper into all these individual items. So let's look at the device inventory first. So a device inventory allows you to view the devices across all of your users' organization. You can review these devices by manufacturers, model, brand, anything that you want. Now, to do this, we have come up with a few different views. So first is a graphical view. So here we use a tree map or we use a tree map where you can look at what device is distributed across all of your users. The larger the square, that means the larger footprint that device or the model has. The colors simply tell you what models of these devices are. Next, if you are a person who likes spreadsheets, then we also have a flat list of all these information as well. The same amount of filters and widgets will be available on the same page, on this page as well, so that you can apply those filters and slice and dice this data however you want it to identify these devices. And last but not least, we will show you or allow you to see individual device detailed information as well for each user. Software. So similar to device, software inventory also utilizes the same nomenclature when it comes to visualization. We have a graphical view, we have a flat list, and of course, user details page. Now, there's one single caveat when it comes to software. Now, typically on a Windows operating system, when you install a software, depending on the vendor who it is, they would install updates or patches apart from the main executable that is on the operating system. In some cases, they just simply replace the underlying executable, but in some cases, they are just complementary items installed along with it. So to overcome this problem of showing this information repeatedly, we have tried to identify these software executables, patches, and updates, and then group them together as a single logical group, which we are calling it software groups. And this way, when you look at your graphical UI, we will show you these software groups that are installed across all your users. So again, the same logic applies. The bigger the square, the larger the footprint, and the colors simply mean that these are the different vendors that are across all your organization. So a color that dominates means that you rely on a particular vendor a lot more than other vendors. And in software, we also allow you to view historical versions and updates for any given application. And last but not least, when you're looking at a software installed on a user's device, you will be able to view the same information as well, where you can look at a software, the location it is installed at, and what are the version updates that have happened over a period of time. Now let's look at the processes. Now, when it comes to processes, we do a little differently. It follows the same nomenclature as devices and software, but the information is laid out in a little different manner. So again, when it comes to processes, it is important for us to understand how the health of my system is. You would have noticed a lot of people install all these small little utilities that show that how your CPU utilization is, and they alert you when something goes off. So ZDX also tends to do something very similar to that. What we do is we collect the top 50 processes every time we are looking at health metrics, and which we do at every 20 seconds. We average it out at every minute and then upload this data to our databases every 5 minutes. So you do have a lot more granularity. And by doing this, we identify if a software is running for more than a minute at say 80 or 90%, that's a red flag. So you want to make sure that these processes, you identify them and then take action accordingly. Now, it'll also allow you to track individual processes and also track it across each and every users in the organization, and how is it impacting and how much percentage of users it is impacting. So as I mentioned, that we identify a threshold first. So a threshold is set up. And so instead of using a tree view where you have different box sizes, we also have the color is basically used to identify the total number of impacts or breaches it has had on the threshold that we have set up. So the darker the box gets, that means the process has breached a particular threshold that you set up that many more times. The lighter the box gets, it means that it has breached a lot less. Now, there will be definitely different size of these boxes. That just indicates that the process is present across how many users. You can also select a particular process and view and have the same exact view across all your users and see how it has been impacting and at what time. Yes, you also have a flat list of all these processes. However, slicing and dicing this information in a flat list becomes a little bit difficult. So, but in any case, you do have the option to basically choose what these processes are and how many users do have it in a flat list format as well. When it comes to user details page, along with the CPU utilization, you will also be able to see the top processes impacting that CPU as well for a given user. Now let's take a look at the demo. Now, this is the device overview page, and you will quickly notice that the UI is very similar to all of our pages. That is, we have all these filters up top. However, along with these filters, we also have 2 extra filters now. So you can filter out by vendor or by a particular model. Now, we have these widgets which can also be used as filter. But the widgets do go an extra step where they provide you with extra information as to how the distribution is. So at a single glance, I can see what % of users have hard drives versus SSDs. Similarly, memory distribution. We want to make sure that whenever IT administrators look at the distribution of their devices, they want to know who has how much memory installed and who has how much disk space. or the size of the disk. So these also act as filters, but also show you the distribution of all these users. Now, when you look at the tree map on the bottom, the size of the boxes does tell you like how many, the total number of users using that particular model. The color indicates the vendor over here. And each of the box, you can hover over it and it will show you a tooltip that gives the exact numbers. You can click on the details and see all the individual devices across all of your users in this list format. So you can notice that automatically my filter has been applied over here. The page is exactly the same as the previous page with the same number of filters and the same number of widgets. And instead of having a tree view, I just have a flat list of all my users. Going to software, we have a very similar UI. It's just that on the filters, I have vendors. Now I have a software group. So I can select a single software group and see who has installed all of these software groups in their machines. Now, again, the size of the box indicates the size of the install base, and the color simply means the vendor over here. So the tooltip also shows you this same information, and clicking on the software details will take me to the flat list page for that software. So now I can see Microsoft Teams is installed across which user, and I can see the OS distribution again, so I can identify who's using Windows and what version of Windows or a Mac, and what is my version distribution. And this is something that we think is going to be very useful, because you typically want the same version of Teams installed on every single user's device. However, that's not always the case. So this widget will allow you to show that what version is the most dominant, and how many users have not updated to the latest version. Along with that, on the list, you can see the name and the user, the name of the device and the user who has this particular software installed, the location where it's installed, the OS information, and the date when it was installed. And you can click over here to get the version history as well. So here it will show you all of the versions that the user had installed and updated over a period of time. Now coming to processes, again, very similar UI. However, now instead of having different colors for a vendor, we have intensity. So as you can see, I have a threshold already identified over here that says, anytime a process goes over 10% for a 1 minute duration, let me know, or put it in a bucket so that I know how many times a particular process is breaching this threshold. So again, OS we thought was a very important widget, so that you can identify which OS you want to measure. And then we also have a widget that shows you the number of CPU cores on every device and the distribution of it. Because these processes are impacting your CPU directly, we thought the CPU cores filter would be an additional help over here. Now, if you look at the tree map, again, the size of the box determines the number of users using that particular device. So the bigger the box, the larger the install base. However, the intensity of the color determines how many times that process has breached a threshold. So you can see over here that a larger box can have a darker deep red. Also, a smaller box can also have a darker deep red space. So that means that Illustrator and Microsoft Teams.exe have had extremely high breaches. However, their install bases are vastly different. Now you can again select a particular a process over here and look at the details. And here we show a very similar UI to what we were seeing, but here we have two options now. So for Microsoft Teams, we are showing that over a period of time in the last 2 hours, where has Microsoft Teams been more prevalent? So here, the concept of the filter or threshold doesn't apply, because we are just looking at how Microsoft Teams is performing across all my users and where it has been. The intensity of the color determines where most of your users have been. Now, here you can see, let's take an example of the first time slot I have. So here, it tells me the darker color is in the 0 to 20%. That means a lot of my users were in this bucket. I do have a few users in these two buckets over here, that is 20 to 40 and 60 to 80. And then I have a higher number of users in the 40 to 60 bucket. And of course, a few of those in the 80 to 100 as well. So this tells me how my processes has been distributed across my users. And of course, on the bottom, we show you the list of all the users in a list format. And we show you the number of CPU incidents that a single user has had in the last couple of hours that is selected over here. Now, when you're looking at the user details page, there are two options. Now, today, when you click on a point in CPU, you can select the top impacting process. And this will show up another tooltip right alongside it over here that shows you the top 50 processes at that point in time. However, we are looking at a chart for the last couple of hours. So at the bottom, we will show you the processes that have had breached the threshold in the last 2 hours and how many times. The same logic applies. The darker the color, the more impact the breaches it has had. You can also select a process over here, and this will show you a time map of how that process has been performing in the last 2 hours for that single user. So this way you can see if Microsoft Teams has been performing really bad and consuming a lot of CPU, or it has been on the lower side of the scale. So this particular chart tells me that either I need to do something with the device or it needs an upgrade, check the memory, check how many CPU cores it has, how much of disk space it has, etc., and then take a decision whether to replace or an upgrade the device. Thank you, and I will hand it over to Dara now.
Thank you, Vandan. So as Vandan mentioned about software device and process inventory that we are doing natively with ZDX, we also support Microsoft Endpoint Analytics Intune license integration with ZDX. With this, we focus on providing deeper we provide and getting deeper insights from CDX with Microsoft Analytics integration. It is just going to give us more information, collecting more metrics around your startup score from devices. It's going to be on the organization level or on the individual user level. The other matrix that we collect is going to be software app reliability score, which is going to give more information around the crash analytics at the organization level as well as the user level, and instantly visualize sign-in, boot scores, impacting startup processes, and application and crash performance. So while we collect all this data, this is just to give a single pane of glass for the administrators to connect the whole user experience from the time a user switches on their laptop until they try to access the application with the native software device and process analytics that Vandan explained earlier. So this is just to give a complete end-to-end overview of how a user would experience with their devices. And that's the main aim of this integration. I'll move to the demo. Okay, so for the demo, over here, you see that this screen, we're just going to add onto the existing device overview that Vandan went over some time back. So we have introduced two more widgets as part of Microsoft Endpoint integration, which is devices by startup score. Here we have segregated the devices into the startup scores into different buckets, and just that if your startup score is poor, that could be one of the reasons why you are taking where your user could be facing poor performance and just trying to get to the responsive desktop. So their sign-in time could be or their boot in time would be really high. So this is an indication that those devices need probably more attention to see what's happening with the background processes when they're trying to get into their desktops or their devices. And a good startup score would mean that everything's working fine for them. The other widget that we introduced is the crashes. This tells that what were the crashes for different devices that we observed for different devices across your organization. These widgets, they act as filters as well. So you can click on them and they'll filter the tree map that you see over here. Now, well, this is a visualization to see the information. There's also a tabular format to see the same information. Uh, so for the tabular format, we see the exact same widgets that we saw earlier, and just that we see the whole the list of all the devices in a tabular format. You see the list of all devices as well as a new column that got added, which is the startup score. So for example, if I click on 61 to 80, I can just apply this filter and I'll just say 121 devices that have the score, a startup score between 61 to 80. If I click on the startup score icon over here, this just gives me an overview of the device, Louis Rico Jr. I see their startup score, which is 72 out of 100. Their device is meeting goals. So as per the Microsoft standards, their device is on the is actually in a very good, I mean, they have the latest Microsoft standards that they meet the goals for the health of the device. Their core boot score is pretty good, which is 82 out of 100. Their core sign-in score is 62 out of 100. And then you see the granular segregation, that's core boot time and core sign-in time, which gives you the time and seconds that the user took to log in into their laptop. You see the underlying matrix like code, group policy boot time and group policy sign-in time, that tells you the different time it took as different phases when the user was trying to log into their laptop or when they were trying to restart their laptop. Now, this is to get the overview. If you want to drill deeper into this particular user, when you click on the user details page, you see a new row getting added on the top, which gives you the Microsoft Endpoint score and an ability to drill down into view endpoint analytics. Over here, we again give you the same overview information on the top, covering the whole endpoint analytics score, as well as the analytics score is combined of startup performance plus software reliability. So we show the underlying two matrix that makes up the Microsoft Endpoint Analytics score. Now, if you drill down further, we have startup performance and software reliability as two tabs. For startup performance, earlier what we saw was the score for the last 24 hours, but you can see the historical score for last 14 days and see how the users' startup performance was over the last 14 days. So this graph here focuses on core boot score, on the startup score as well as the core sign-in score for the last 14 days for you to get a trend of how the performance is. Then there is boot history to give you an indication in the last 14 days. It gives you the boot history over the last 14 days, the number of times the user logged in, user restarted their laptop. So for each of the boot process that each of the restart that they have done, you see the update phase, you see group policy phase, the time taken to the sign-in screen, as well as the time taken for feature update. All of these combine and give you the final boot history and time. Then the same goes with sign-in history. So it calculates the time from first sign-in to getting to a responsive desktop, so your device is usable. So it gives underlying information, and it also gives top 10 impacting startup processes. So these are all the top 10 processes that shows up with which actually had a pretty high load time when the users tried to like log into the laptop. While we saw the startup performance, with the software reliability, the user with this data, we focus on the crash analytics. So it basically covers two kinds of crashes: the software crashes and where the software was unresponsive. You get to see that in a tabular format over the last 14 days, or in a graphical format or a tabular format, with the timestamp that tells you exactly which software name or software publisher as well as version was had crashed or was unresponsive, and the type of event. That's all. Any other questions?
Thank you, Tara. Sorry about that. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us or reach out to your SE or account manager. They will make sure that these questions reach to us, and we'll be more than happy to answer them. With that, we thank you for watching this recording, and have a great day.
Thank you.